Sometimes I lie awake in my bed at night, afraid of death. Quite the not so subtle opening, I know, but it's true. I can't help but stare at my ceiling, wondering what I'm fighting for or why I'm even fighting to begin with whatsoever. I think at one point, I even ended up, getting out of bed in the middle of the night just to call one of my family members from up north. I couldn't care less. I mean, I needed someone, anyone, fucking someone I knew to talk to. Your thoughts can drive you to doing some really nutty things sometimes. If that's even a good word to use at all. What I had found, however, made me think a little too hard. Not just about my life crisis in general, but so many other things. And if I'm being honest, I don't know whether to be scared or disgusted or even both. I'm in my late 40s, and I like to go urban exploring on a weekly basis. I own a nifty little Facebook page where I share my findings, travels, etc., etc. One place that I really wanted to visit was Wimstone in Warwickshire, the original filming location for the Teletubbies. I was never the biggest fan of the characters or how they acted in the series, but for some reason their designs and the overall setting in Wimstone just so happened to win me over because I always found it charming for some reason. And, I know that the set is practically just a small body of water with unmown grass now, all because the owner got tired of the tourists plaguing the place. But, it's nice to look back on history. Truth be told, though, me and my cousin had worked in the production crew for the series, and we learned a few things here and there about, like, how to manage cameras and stuff before we left in 1999 after getting a better deal in Stratford. Didn't pay as much as a job in the series, but, of course, you still have to pay the bills. And we remained in touch with the creator of the series named Danny Wood, who told us that after we left and the show was finished in 2001, the costumes worn by the actors were stolen, and all they had left was the prop for the Hoover, the Nunu. And this resulted in the main characters having to be remade from scratch for the 2015 relaunch. Now, keep in mind, this is important. So, I drove to Wimshire by car, and, it was worth it to get there in the end. And so when I made it, it was as you'd expect. A small circular pond accompanied by St. Augustine grass upon numerous hills. Beautiful. And all I wanted to do was just lie down there and stare at the cloudy sky for a few minutes and then go off to the pub for a few drinks. And that's when I spotted something off in the distance. A trailer, hidden within the trees surrounding the area. Bit strange, it might have belonged to someone in the production crew. So I walked over there where it was, cracking a few twigs and breaking leaves with each step, until I finally approached the trailer. The smell was fucking rank, but then again, it was probably sitting there for 2 decades, so of course it would fucking smell like shit. So I covered my nose, and while it was very moldy, dusty, and dimly lit, I noticed a small rack of standard VHS tapes, all labeled and stacked together like Jenga blocks covered in dust. And so, decided to collect them because, whether or not they'd be property of like Rydell Productions or whatever, I worked for them, so that's on my CV. So quite frankly, it's shared property as far as I'm concerned. And be a nice keepsake. So I took them, put them in the car, walked around a bit, and then just went off. When I got home, I called my cousin to come over for a few drinks, and we skimmed through some of the tapes with the help of an old basement Pasonic. Most of them consisted of various test reels, early recordings, bloopers, the shit you expect, the early days of like vlogging during the construction of the Superdome and the aforementioned Teletubby Land. So upon further inspection, however, some of the tapes had no labels. Most were empty, with the exception of one. No markings, no warning, just right off the bat. I stuck the tape into the slot and we waited. Jittery startup, but the film eventually showed up after a short wait. Up came the usual setting for a Teletubbies episode, except that the grass was untrimmed, meaning that this would have been shot sometime after the series had ended. Shots of the Tubby Superdome appeared on screen as the sound of birds twittering filled my TV speakers, devoid of music, yet for some reason delightful. The automatic doors of the Tubby Superdome opened up, and out came Tinky Winky, slowly limping outside as if he had broken his femur. Hobbling, he let out weird, straining grunts. He lamely ambled up the hill, groaning as he did so, before eventually falling on his ass and looking up at the sky. Cut to his face, somewhat forlorn. He was likely not very happy with living or himself. Reminded me of myself in my 30s. That was when the view switched to a shot of the sun. Not the baby son from the series itself. More of a mature woman, no older than like 35, let's say. Possibly the baby's mother, but who knows. Tinky Winky sighed and whimpered before gazing back at the sun. The sun spoke. It was slightly echoed, but coherent enough to hear. Poor thing, you're frightened, aren't you? The lad nods. You're afraid of what will come next, aren't you? He sniffs, realizing how long it took for him to simply walk up a hill to begin with. The sheer speed of his hike made him long to regress or go back to a time when he used to be young again. I understand how you feel, my dear. You could pass on in the next year, day, or even minute, but I can assure you, your life was not created in vain. You were put on this precious earth to make people laugh, cry, and cry tears of hope. His eyes grew slightly wider. Past scenes from the show involving the poor old critter and his friends faded into view. Look around you. If your life was in vain, you wouldn't have been given these gorgeous fields or this entertaining little home of yours or your friends. Think of them. Tears strained down his cheeks, presumably from the eye drops given to the actors behind the scenes. The son quietly sighed. My child, live your life to the very fullest. That's what I did, up until I was 2. Tinky Winky's belly vision thing came on, and static erupted from it. Startled, he'd shift down to his belly, the camera zooming on the fuzzy screen. What transpired was real security footage. Something I never expected, and I do not ever want to see again. It was a large ballroom for an unspecified religious event, with an unsupervised toddler running all over the place. The only child at that party, mind you. Certain props were meticulously decorated all over the place, like small crosses, an offering box, items to keep the offering table packed, stuff that would probably be found at a party like this. The child seemed happy and carefree, until her dress met a candle. The adults around her focused on their own conversations, kept on their conversations up until she shouted at the top of her lungs. Fully succumbed to the flames, and by the time they were jumping in to help her, it was too late. Her panicking led to her colliding with the table, bottles of alcohol tipping and dumping all over onto her. Her skin charred, and the smoke detector went off amid the quick spread. One lady in particular cried her lungs out, the most out of anyone involved at that party. The footage then cut to static and zoomed away from Tinky Winky's stomach. A moment of silence came about, with Tinky Winky and the son sharing a stare. The purple lad would then sigh and lie on his back, looking up at the sky with a tired look. Now you know the true answer. Its real importance, said the son. Tinky Winky slowly shut his eyes, and his moment ceased. The camera transitioned to a side view of him lying against the soft grass. The other Teletubbies, being Dipsy, Lala, and Poe, limped towards him, inspected the lifeless body, and they all collapsed to their knees, with Poe rattling him, desperate for him to wake up. Soft whimpers filled the air, quiet cries, as they mourned over the loss of their precious friend. The son's voice could be heard one last time. Thank you for listening, it said. The video then distorted, and the tape ended, cutting to a blue screen. My cousin and I sat there for 2 minutes, in silence. I was terrified with what I'd just seen, and I couldn't help but put my head in my hands. I had so many questions nailing through my head all at once. None of it made sense to me. None of it. I will say this though. Watching it gave me the motivation to hug my parents more than I usually would. And even then, I think this tape might be useful for the BBC.